Alright, brother. Another Monday. Here we are, episode 2, live with Dr. Kevin Preston. We are down back at his Chinese medicine wellness center in Vernon. I'm so excited about this conversation because I think we're going to be able to help a ton of people with this chat that we're about to have. And big reason that we started this company was to really help people with mental health, addiction, PTSD, and anxiety. And of course, it's grown to more and more things as we learn more about mushrooms.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that I don't think this company would have even started if I hadn't gone through what I went through with anxiety. And I thought I'd just start with a bit of a story, and then I'll just kind of hand it off to you, and then to kind of just see where we go from there. But
yeah, sounds good.
2017, I had been out of rehab for an entire year.
Okay.
And I ended up rebuilding a company that was like almost dead before I went into rehab. Spent an entire year rebuilding it. Got it to a place where it was making money again, and it was starting to get exciting again, and I had a bunch of clients, and I was proud of myself again because, you know, I was performing and executing and making myself proud again for the first time in a very long time.
Yeah.
And the phone rang, and I got a friend of mine introduced a brand new opportunity to me over a phone call. And it sounded pretty exciting. It sounded like it was going to be super challenging. It sounded like I was going to be able to help a lot of other entrepreneurs start their entrepreneurial journey. And that was something that I was super attracted to. I was super excited about helping other people get into entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
And so we ended up going through this process. We ended up getting the master franchisee rights to actually, at the time, it was the fastest growing franchise brand in North America. And so I didn't know much about it. I decided to kind of ease my way into it. And this is a long story, so I'll try to just cut it just to little pieces here. But what happened was there was a franchise expo in Calgary. And this is before we decided to put the money together to actually buy the rights.
Yeah.
And it was 1 year to the day that I had been out of rehab was this franchise expo. And I thought it was just like, that timing, I couldn't ignore it. I just felt like, hey, it's like your time to go and shine, or whatever that might have been.
Yeah.
I just felt like I was just ready. And
timing's important.
Yeah. So I ended up going into this. We ended up going to this franchise expo. The concept went over really well with the people that attended, and I kind of thought, okay, well, I think there's something here. Why don't we gun for these master franchisee rights? And we did. So I ended up basically raising $780,000 to start this company. We bought the master franchisee rights. I sold the other company, moved to Calgary. Elise ended up coming, I think, 4 months after I got there. We started looking for like a downtown Calgary office.
Yeah.
Got it. And, you know, things were moving really quickly, and we were really excited. Like, I don't know if you've ever had that where you're starting something new and you're super excited about what's coming on.
Yeah.
But nervous at the same time, and like kind of knowing that, you know, this was going to be a huge challenge. But so fast forward 6 months, and we ended up getting our product into Canada. It was a robotic frozen yogurt vending machine is what this thing was. It was made by NASA, and you kind of pressed a button and it would go and spit out an ice cream and put the toppings on, and then just like hand it over to you, spit out a spoon. And it just seemed to me like it was going to work tremendously well, right? And so, but there was a problem. And the problem was that the machine, we had only seen a prototype up until then. So we sold a whole bunch of these machines, and we sold them in packs of 3. And basically these things were about $150,000 for a 3-pack. And so we ended up selling a whole ton of these all across the country and procuring these top-end locations. And all of a sudden these machines started to show up. And they didn't work. I started to come into my own office, drive into downtown Calgary, and as soon as I got to a certain set of lights, I just always remember getting to this set of lights, and my heart just thumping. And then going into the lobby of my building, pressing the elevator up, and just getting into the elevator and just knowing, like, this isn't going to be a good day, because like everything that I had to do was about problem solving and about trying to fix all these issues that we all of a sudden had on our hands. And so this went on for 2 years, and I was literally putting out fires. I might as well have had, you know, like a fire extinguisher with me at all times, because like that was my job. And I would just open my laptop when I set up, you know, got downtown, open my laptop, and I just remember my heart just sinking and like gasping for air and thinking like, whoa, this is what anxiety is. This is like, I get it now. I'm having a tough time breathing. I'm having a tough time thinking. I don't want to be here ever.
Yeah.
But I was so deep into this that I had to try to get ourselves out of it. And there was no walking away. It was just like I had to face it. And it became really complicated for me because I hated going to work. I hated the people that I was working with. I hated the project that I was on. I hated the position that I was in. And, you know, all of a sudden it was just like, it was almost like pre-rehab where I was starting to feel really lost again.
Yeah.
And like, so I thought we'd start a conversation there, because I think so many people today have that feeling of being lost and have that feeling of just being overwhelmed, in the sense of like, you know, this disconnection, I think, that we're all feeling from one another. You know, since this pandemic began, I can tell you, you know, I have felt disconnected to the world, and I have felt at times just really, really high anxiety, and just kind of, you know, that feeling never really left until I actually found mushrooms, which will be a part of this conversation.
Yeah.
So grateful to have kind of worked my way through that feeling. But I think this is much more about like, how can we, that story of feeling lost and lonely and broken, you know, is that something you're seeing today in your clinic? Is that something that, you know, you're personally up against, or like, like stories like that? I'd love you just to kind of share what you're seeing here since this all started. Like, is it noticeable in your clinic? Like, are people coming in here just a little bit more lost and a little bit more almost helpless in a sense? Or?
Yeah, I would say that, well, maybe just to thank you for sharing your story, first of all, but what you touched on to me are like these elements that really build anxiety in the first place. And the fire extinguisher is a great example. That it seems like many people in their lives, a lot of the time, especially in North America, I can't speak for the rest of the world necessarily, but we'll just use North America as example. Everybody's got their own personal fire extinguisher with them, like almost every day.
Yeah.
And that's reaction versus like responding to a scenario. We react because things are maybe already on fire in our lives. And I get it. I mean, a lot of us, you know, we're working hard and we're parents, or we've got relationships and we've got work and business and family, and there's a lot of things like happening. So I would say in, you know, things that I see in the clinic, the cup's already half full, 3/4 full, and that little bit that you have left at the top, when something does happen, the cup's overflowing, we can't react properly, or we can't respond in a really beautiful way where we can stay heart-centered, pretty calm. And I'm human too. I'm not calm all the time.
Yeah.
But there has been a lot of time cultivated over, you know, more than a decade where I can more easily become calm, or I'm orienting from that place. And then if there's something happening, and I get overwhelmed at times too, but when I'm in that zone, that's, you know, I'm reaching for the fire extinguisher, and then that can become a pattern. So you said you're in that pattern for almost 2 years. Yeah. The brain actually starts to wire that in, and that becomes more of a pathway of operation in your body. So then even little things that would come up, it accumulates. Yeah. That even something small, boom, going into anxiety, panic, overwhelm. But it might not be the little thing that's happening. And I would say I've recognized that in my life too, with emotions are different things that we work on. It's not always the thing. And often it's not about that at all. It's about everything that's kind of stacked up there for months or years, sometimes decades. So in seeing where we're at as humanity now, especially in the last, 20 months, I believe a lot of people's cups were full already. And then it wouldn't take much to go into reactive mode, fire extinguisher, like full bore. And then where's the relief? Especially because it's not 1 month, 2 months, short periods of time. Even in your case, prior to this, if you're in that state for quite a while, there's a really well-developed circuitry of anxiety like patterning. So then if anything else gets added to your plate, even outside of that, there's no bandwidth left. And then we are in panic. And so I would say I've seen more panic attack like patterns in the last year and a half than I've seen at any time in my career.
Okay.
Lots of anxiety, lots of panic. And I think the panic, when you have a panic button, it's when you can't cope anymore. Mm-hmm. Your body can't cope, your organs can't cope, there's something, or your mind, it's so overwhelmed.
Yeah.
You reach the panic attack, and people will tell you, if they've had panic attacks, it's debilitating. Yeah. They think they're dying. They think they're having a heart attack or all number of things. They freeze completely. They can't actually function. That's the sign that the nervous system is definitely in overwhelm, for sure. But it's not necessarily brought on by something overwhelming that we would think is overwhelming. But it's that there was already so much there. There was so much fuel for that fire.
Yeah.
It's one little thing doesn't go right or unexpected, it can put them into a panic. And I've even seen that happen spontaneously for people where nothing really happened. But it was building up. So there was a lot there. So I think... you're noticing that probably with, friends or family or whoever. There's a lot of anxiety going on.
Yeah.
This is why we wanted to speak to it. Not that it's a new phenomenon, but it's a thing right now for sure.
It's interesting that you brought up panic attacks, because what happened for me is that anxiety that I had going into my office, this was, 2 years prior, right as I was about to exit this, 2.5 years later, was when I experienced what I would consider my first panic attack.
Okay.
So it was 2.5 years of that anxiety, really never going away.
So building up, right?
Building. I was on a same-day flight from Calgary to Vancouver to go do a presentation. And I just remember getting to Vancouver, getting in a taxi. The presentation was in Surrey. And that taxi ride, just feeling so underprepared for this presentation, which is so not like me, especially when it comes to business presentations and things like that. I really like to come prepared. Should be noted, by the way, that this entire series was not being about prepared, and it was about being off the cuff, and it was about being just as raw and authentic as we possibly could lead a conversation. So, Can
I say something on that? Yeah. I think part of the reason why we wanted to show up in that way, and for everybody tuning into this in the future now, it's that's flow state though too. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's the opposite of overwhelm and anxiety, because we want to prepare, and there's a lot of ways to prepare as a human being for life or for work or business. But if we are prepared in some way, and if we can just surrender and let go, because so much about anxiety, I've noticed with patients for sure, it's about control. Mm-hmm. So as soon as you feel like you've lost control in some way, anxiety is right there, because the anxiety can be a feeling of not being in control. Yeah. And so certainly over the last year and a half, a lot of people feel very much not in control of their lives. Yeah. Decisions are being made for them. They're maybe being told what they can and can't do. And without judging that, most humans would feel some anxiety around that because they're losing control over something. And this happens on the micro level inside our homes, or different things happening, or with work, things that happen that we don't feel in control of. It could lead to anxiety unless we're finding that middle ground, I would say, or some balance around letting life flow and seeing what comes up, and actually using our navigational systems that we have inherently inside to follow life and to follow where we need. And then as things come up, we can respond instead of react, because we're not gripping onto life so tightly. Yeah. And it's a challenge at times, how do you find that flow? And so I think in these conversations, we just wanted to be able to flow. Yeah. And we're just two humans totally having a conversation, and in this way we can talk about anxiety without feeling anxious, because we're allowing that flow to happen.
Yeah, thank you for that, dude. And honestly, I could just to circle back to this moment I had in this taxi ride. Pure panic. My heart was racing. I was trying to make a phone call to one of my other partners, like trying to scrape this presentation together. I couldn't even think properly. And this was actually the same day. I'm not sure if I mentioned this in the first episode. I was back at that airport lounge after this really hard day. Okay. That was the day where I was like, the guy next to me had ordered that drink. This all happened that day. This panic attack.
It was a big day.
It was a very big day. Oh. And I ended up leaving this business about 30 days after this completely. And basically, it wasn't long after that I got introduced to mushrooms for the very first time. And I was looking for some tools because I've always been open to the external help, like the counseling, the therapy. You know, it worked tremendously well for my life when I went into rehab. Mm-hmm. I just to be able to talk to somebody and just start like literally taking layers off, and just like every time I spoke about some of this old stuff that I was bogging me down, it was just like taking another layer of clothing off. Like it was just, and all of a sudden at the end of the 30 days, I just felt like I could breathe again. But that started to stockpile again because like you forget about some of those things. Some people get out of the rhythm of therapy. Mm-hmm. Some people get out of the rhythm of the mindfulness techniques. Mm-hmm. And I certainly was, because I often get so engaged in the projects that I'm working on that I can forget about myself completely and utterly. Like literally working 8 days a week if you could, but like literally 7 days a week for 2.5 years. And I'm just totally neglecting myself. And so, you know, I think what I would love to share with the world was I was able to find an answer through therapy and through journaling and through breath work and through microdosing and mushrooms. It's been amazing tools for me. Mm-hmm. But I'll tell you, even going to see my own MD during this process, you know, the first thing they want to do is use the tools that they have. Yeah. And what tools do they have right now is, of course, what everybody knows as SSRIs. Which for anybody that doesn't know is really what they classify depression and anxiety medications into. Do I have that right?
Yep.
Yeah. Is there anything else that goes in the SSRI?
Well, there's a lot of categories of pharmacology, and I mean, we don't have to get into pharmacology deeply, but there's several categories, and the ones that are used most would be like classically in an antidepressant category, and then there's anti-anxiety categories as well. And further, and then, you know, there's things for insomnia and sleep disorders and things. There is some crossover between those, because sometimes they'll use this one for this category and vice versa. So sometimes they get overlapped and stacked up a little bit. Okay. And I think in looking at medications in general, from a holistic standpoint, or even, you know, speak from a Chinese medicine point of view, we want to understand, why is there a pattern of depression or anxiety or insomnia, for example, like going on in the first place? Yeah. What might be happening like in your body that's creating that? And so what's interesting about a lot of the modern research, especially the last couple of years, where they're talking about brain chemistry, it used to be thought that your brain chemistry was what dictated your mood. So if somebody was experiencing depression, it would often be told to them, it's because of your brain chemistry you feel this way. So if we adjust your brain chemistry using pharmacology, theoretically, then that should go away, because your brain chemistry is better, your body chemistry would be better. But what they're finding more now, and this is a lot of really compelling research too, is that your thoughts and your mood, like your feeling and your emotions, is what dictates your chemistry, not the other way around. So that really changes the notion on medications that might be fairly suppressive. And I'm not, like, I don't want to judge medications that way. I always just want to take things back to like, what's really healthy and nourishing for the body and for the mind? What do you need? You know, what tools? And I think, generally speaking, there's a lot of tools available now. And I'm usually, you know, in the clinic, I'm trying to evaluate anything of, is this aligned with nature? And when I think that way, is like, is this aligned with the body? Because we're natural living beings. We have natural systems. Our cells operate in a certain way. There's things that are very like pro biology, and then there's things that are maybe against biology in the system. And the things against biology is like heavy duty oxidative stress and stress in general, things that are unhealthy, or like preservatives and chemicals and metals and pesticides, all these different things that we potentially take into the body. Those detract from healthy biology. And so whenever I'm looking at putting something in the system, or somebody taking something, whether it's like vitamins, supplements, medications, any of those things, microdosing, are they in line with the health of the body and an expansion of our biology, or are they contracting the biology? And a couple things that you're speaking to, the breath is one that really stands out. And I can't remember where I heard this quote from years ago, but the idea is that anxiety is actually excitement without the breath. So, even as we're sitting here, it's like, are we breathing, deeply into the diaphragm? And when we look at modern society, it seems like, and again, I'll use North America as an example, I would say so many people have breathing issues. And I mean, this isn't just my idea. I see this and I work with this in the clinic all the time, but, we feel it. And there's even times where I feel that too, where I haven't taken a breath and it's been 2 to 3 hours and I haven't taken a breath like below my upper chest. So what that does is it engages the shoulder and the neck muscles. You tend to mouth breathe and you get more into a fight or flight scenario, and it actually amplifies adrenaline and feeling anxious. It starts building up that energy. All this starts rising up, and you breathe in deeply and you engage the diaphragm, or solar plexus, low belly. It will change your nervous system. It's like your body can't help it. So when you think of a time when you're anxious or like working in that environment all the time, I can almost guarantee like you were not breathing into the diaphragm, which engages the parasympathetic nervous system, which for those that don't understand the nervous system necessarily, it's like you have very basically like fight or flight, and then you have relaxation. And it's not like one or the other. We're on this spectrum all the time, and they're discovering more about this too, that you can be in multiple places at one time within the body, but it depends on how all that chemistry is working together. So if you start breathing deeply, you'll put yourself more into a sedative state, calm, relaxed, digestion. So I think this is something, just as an aside, for eating. How many people eat their meals like rush, stressed, in between work, or they're not stopping for work, so you're on the computer, got the food going, you're not even engaging any of the precursors to really healthy, good digestion, because you kind of cut off that energy, and you're anxious and stressed and eating at the same time and in the workflow potentially. So of course there's going to be digestive issues, heartburn, acid reflux, like all these things lead to more symptoms around that. So with the breath as well, I believe mushrooms, a lot of the functional mushrooms, and potentially microdosing too, what I see with patients is it allows them to breathe. Because so many people are microdosing now, and I believe there's going to be more, it's like it gives space back into your life. And if you have space in your life, you can breathe. And if you can breathe, you're not going to feel as anxious. It doesn't go together.
Yeah.
I've never seen anybody in a panic attack or an overwhelmed state that's like, breathing gently and calmly and deeply. You can't help it in that state. Right. But you can help yourself out of that state by moving to the breath and just remembering to breathe. And, you and I've talked about things before of keeping things simple and looking at life in that way. The breath is probably the most, underrated thing that we have as a tool that keeps us alive, of course, but we're not really breathing to the capacity that's available. And then, we're in these states of anxiety a lot of the time.
The breath stuff is fascinating to me because, if we were to give one tool to whoever's listening right now, maybe someone that's having a panic attack or has them regularly, I can think of 3 friends right now in my immediate circle that are all medicated for this.
Okay.
They all carry Ativan. They don't take it regularly, but it's there in their pocket. all the time, just in case something like this happens.
Yeah.
And so, like, you know, what can we say to them? Like, what like in the middle of a panic attack, how do we? What are some tools that we can provide?
Yeah. So one of the things that's really important with anxiety or panic, obviously, our state that we're in is like a huge key. So when somebody's really in a heavy duty overwhelmed state, nervous system super overwhelmed, we got to use tools to change that state. For me, I mean, it's not always convenient. Cold shower.
Okay.
Because I think you've jumped into cold lakes and different things at different times. Some people would go into panic maybe as a result of that without the intention of moving into it. Yeah. But if they're truly in a panic state, and it would be maybe a bit like rude to do if you were a friend and had a bucket of water and you do that, it shocks them out of a state that they're in.
Okay.
You almost can't help it. They might go back to that, but something that changes the state. Obviously, we want to do something that's really healthy. But for me, I'll use cold shower because suddenly my energy and attention is on that cold shower. My body receptors are responding to the cold. And I may take a few deep breaths in, but then I'm breathing again because I need to, I need to respond to the physiological cue. So that's a key. But if you're not going to do that and you're not with somebody, you're on your own, there's a lot of techniques, and maybe I won't get super detailed, but if we give, imagine your 3 friends are in the room right now, I'd say tap your thymus gland, which is just under the sternum right here, where there's a saying called thump your thymus.
Okay.
It can calm your nervous system too, so you can just tap here. Okay. Some people do this naturally.
Is this tapping? Would this be considered
Yeah,
tapping?
there's tapping. There's lots of other tapping techniques. This is the one that I've done for myself, and some people, when you watch them, we naturally do these things to calm ourselves. We might kind of massage our hands a little bit, or we kind of tap our feet. It's because we're dispersing energy.
Okay.
But this way of tapping and thumping the thymus, it's easy to remember. Just a few thumps here, it starts to activate the nervous system. It starts to calm the body.
Interesting, man.
So we start to bring in entrainment, and I think part of it is when somebody's in such a heavy-duty anxious mode, they're kind of leaving their body.
Yeah.
And you spoke to that a little bit. If you have heavy-duty stress for a long period of time or heavy-duty anxiety, when you're moving into that daily and it's not going away, it's almost like that energy gets in there and starts displacing you out of your system. And then you're not really there. And so the physical body, we need to be in our physical bodies. So tapping, even if it's here, lower on the sternum, even there's tapping on the head, there's tapping on the third eye. There is massaging, there's acupuncture points everywhere on the hands. You can massage your palms almost anywhere, and it'll generally create a different response in your system. So I believe we do that naturally, and we can do that mindfully to get back in our body.
Okay.
We don't want to abandon our bodies, we want to be integrated.
Okay.
So that's part of it. So recap, cold shower if you want.
Yeah.
Shock your system a little bit out of that state, but then thump the thymus. And of course the other thing is the breath. The key, of course, is remembering to breathe when you're in that state, because it's probably the last thing on your mind.
Right.
So you can use your hands, these healing tools that we have. Again, put it on your body, and then use it as a landmark to breathe into.
Gotcha.
And so as soon as you put your hand here, you can imagine that this hand is a loved one or a friend or anything, even if, call it self-regulation. You can put your hand here and breathe into it, because this will start regulating you too. You can put it on your heart, coming back into the body. Both of these places is where we hold a lot of energy, and so it can kind of get overwhelming at times, but we can also use these energy centers to get back in our system. And then you'll find you may start just breathing naturally a little bit more, but you want to breathe into the belly as much as you can, and that could kick you out of a panic.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here's what, and I love this, and thank you for that, but I'm going to speak for people like myself. When this happened to me, my response was, let's go see the doctor. Let's figure out if there's some type of medication I can get so that this never happens to me again.
Yeah.
And for the past 2 years, as we've been building out this community, and I've been really understanding, SSRIs and the effects on the body, and really watched so many people with so many challenges trying to get themselves off of these things.
Yeah.
But here's what happened since the pandemic started. The total amount of volume in Canada for SSRIs being prescribed has gone up by 32%. So at the start of this pandemic, they had said 1 in 5 people had a mental illness. That number is starting to rise and rise and rise. Mm-hmm. And I think what we need to do here throughout the series is what can we give people so... And listen, for some, maybe going the medicated route is the only route and maybe potentially the best route. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But I can tell you from my vantage point, it seems to be numbing people out. It seems to be desensitizing people. It seems to be completely and utterly neglecting the root cause of what is happening, kind of almost putting a mask on the problem. Mm-hmm. And so getting some temporary relief is what people are telling me they're experiencing.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they're addicted to something. Yeah. And honestly, I'm going to share stories throughout this series of people that I've talked to and people that have questions for you. And honestly, I might as well just bring one up because yesterday I was in a conversation with somebody. This is a woman that I have been talking to quite a bit, like through voice note and text, and we actually had a 45-minute phone call last Sunday. I gave her my number and just said, hey, just call me. I'd love to get the details. And so, but she got on one of these SSRIs 19 years ago. She, just after her first child, she was experiencing what she called baby blues. Mm-hmm. And immediately again, like the doctor just kind of throws her on this, and here she is 20 years later, dude, on the same medication, completely addicted to it. This story is a little bit different because by the time we spoke, she had fully leaned herself off of the SSRI completely. But all of a sudden, for the first time in her life now, she's trying to use microdosing and mushroom products, but now she's having real issues at night sleeping. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, why don't we just... Is there anything you could say to her if she's listening, or to anybody in those shoes of somebody that's coming off of one of these SSRIs, has already done the work to get off, but now is there like... I'm assuming that there's some type of damage that's been caused over 20 years of using this. Is it going to take some time to get regulated again? Like, what has happened to the brain in that 19 years is maybe the best question to ask you.
Yeah, so great question. So I have a lot of stories like that of patients I've worked with where it's literally been 20 years, 25 years of being on the same prescription medication, and they still seem to present with the issue. And, maybe it's anxiety or depression, because I've seen examples of all of those things. So there's a few ways to unpack this, and even looking at what to do short term could be a little different than what to do long term. That I would say long term, the deeper dive work on yourself is what's required.
Okay.
In the short term, we want to help bridge people into that deep dive work where they're actually getting down to the root issues. Because what I've seen is that sometimes people are in crisis mode, whatever that might be, and they may see their doctor, which is great, and then they get a prescription to try and work with what the problem is right then. Whatever the crisis is, whatever the fires they're trying to put out, they're not coping, maybe they're not able to parent effectively, they're not able to work. Like, I understand that's significant, and that has to be dealt with. The issue that I see is that whatever was causing all of those things in their life, that sometimes when they get a medication that suppresses those feelings of anxiety or depression, it doesn't go anywhere.
Right.
It just suppresses it. And I'm not saying there's not a time and a place for that potentially, because this podcast isn't really about you should do this, you shouldn't do that. We want people to hear what we're saying, hear the stories, see what resonates, see what doesn't resonate, like make their own decisions. And I say this to patients all the time. What does that feel like to you? Does this resonate? Maybe this doesn't resonate. I don't have all the answers, but I want to direct them in a way that's really healthy for their body, for their mind, for their purpose on the planet, all of those things.
Yeah.
So when we really look at a lot that's been suppressed in the body, if it's been suppressed for a year and you remove that suppression, it's still there. But you can imagine if you've suppressed something or many things for 15 years, 20 years, where you've been a little bit numbed out, and people do this with alcohol. You know, I don't know, you shared a lot about that too. Some people use drugs, recreational drugs, prescription medication. Some people use working out, excessive, like anything that's kind of excessive. Like we're all just trying to cope, and there's all kinds of different tools available for coping. The thing is with suppressive type treatment, whatever those underlying root source issues are, they don't go away until they're addressed. So a lot of the people that I've seen where it's been 20 years in that type of regimen, 20 years later, they may still be dealing and then need to deal with the feelings that led them down that path in the first place. And that's where these tools like really good counseling can come in. Acupuncture, massage, body talk, tapping, EFT, like there's a lot of things available. But I think knowing that if you're going to transition off something, there's probably going to be some work involved. If you know that, I believe it can make it a little bit easier because you can start putting some of those support structures in place. So I think the woman that you're speaking about, maybe there wasn't a lot of support structures in place already, and there's already a transition off medication to do something different, which I think is a huge win anyway. But we need support for each other. We need community, and that's what I love about what you guys are doing is you're creating really beautiful products, but you're creating community. And you provided like that space for this person that you're speaking about. And so building more tools and more support structures, I think that's a lot of times maybe what's lacking, or we don't even know that there's support available, or we don't ask. And I know you and I have talked about that before too, like we're just maybe trying to take care of it on our own. Yeah. So really good tools in place, that makes a world of difference. And so the long-term patterning though from suppressing core level imbalance, they don't really dissolve, unfortunately. I wish they did and it would all just go away. But
so that idea that time heals in this case doesn't really apply. Like you need to circle back to the root cause, which by the way 70% of all mental illness is started in childhood in Canada, statistically. So let's talk about the root cause a little bit. What are some ways that we could access the root cause? What are some ways that we could, and I can already think of some, because for me, microdosing has been an extraordinarily amazing tool for me to be able to access the traumas, because I am that guy that likes to mask everything. I like to run. I didn't like to face this shit, dude. I just like to get out of that feeling. And I would do anything to get out of that feeling. So whether that be smoking weed, going to meet my buddies, going and eating a ton of sugar. You know, I had these things, they were my coping mechanisms. But I realized that like none of that is serving me, right? And so over the past 5 years, I've really tried to go super deep to try to figure out, you know, just like I did in rehab when I was maybe explaining to everybody in episode 1, like, you know, you're up in front of 50 people literally doing a presentation on your life and trying to figure out exactly how you got yourself in there. And it was so effective for me because it was the first time ever I had looked at my life that way. Like, you know.
Well, and this, sorry, I was jump in. This is such a huge key, is that in your case, and with love, I'm saying these things, of course, it took you going to rehab to look at your life in that way. And so I guess what I'd love to say to the audience is like, you don't need to wait until you're in rehab to look at your life in that way, because I think looking at your life is really powerful and really, really hard at times, which is I think a lot of reasons why we don't do that. We're usually waiting for a crisis, or the pain gets enough, or we're struggling or overwhelmed enough, we have to do something. And a lot of times it's coping mechanisms that are reactive and they're not responsive. It's not always breath work, meditation, cold plunges, sauna, acupuncture, like all these things that would look like really healthy tools, because we're usually in such a crisis mode that we're grabbing whatever's close by. because we want to get out of that feeling as quickly as we can. So I think that's where microdosing and a lot of the research in general is showing, it's giving people time and space to be able to face uncomfortable things. And we've sort of been trained as a society, and I don't mean to be hard on myself about this, because I have, or anybody else, that we're not always really good being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
As soon as there's some uncomfortability, depending on what your life is like, you're moving away from that.
Yeah.
And I ran away from many things too. And sometimes I would be physically running away from things and long trail runs or races or different things because I was actively trying to get away from something. I didn't even know what it was.
Yeah.
And so turning and facing things, if we feel like we have support in a community, friends, family, whatever it might be, or different tools like microdosing, maybe that allows us to start moving through layers and start to look at our life in this time frame of, how did I get here? How did I get myself into an anxious state, or a state where I'm in panic a lot, or a job I don't like, or a relationship that I'm really struggling in? What is it that I don't want to face? Yeah. And so there's more tools, thankfully, that people are learning about, and you guys are building products for that. Space inside to start, peering in. It's almost like the analogy that I use sometimes is, snorkeling or something, where you're above the water, but a lot of times we're not looking below the surface. Or even like an iceberg, you only see that tip, pointing up, and maybe you yourself have only looked at that, but what you've done, and even through rehab, I think, then you're looking below the surface. Yeah. And you're seeing how much is there. So I would say that's one of the common things that I find with patients so much. They haven't necessarily looked below the surface because it can be daunting. Yeah. What's under there? But as soon as you start looking into that world with some healthy support, it's a different experience. You're not going there on your own. Totally. And so for those of the people listening to this that are on their own, it's time to sit down and make a list of what types of support are actually in your life. Because I've also seen it where there was actually a lot of support around me, but I didn't see it. I wasn't looking for it, I wasn't asking, or I couldn't accept support. Okay. So I want to say to everybody, it's okay to be looking for help. It's okay to ask for help as a step one. And then what kind of healthy support can we call into our lives and feel worthy of that help coming our way?
That's really interesting, man, because I was doing some reading before this even began, looking at some of the statistics, the mental health statistics, and only 50% of people that are mentally ill are actually going to tell a coworker or a friend.
Yeah.
Whereas if you get diagnosed with cancer or terminal illness, that number is like 90%. And so one of the big things that I think we as a company and we as an organization want to really help with is being able to open up and share and be vulnerable, because I gotta tell you, man, my real healing started when I did that.
Yeah.
And because this pain that I was enduring, it's not serving me at all unless I'm using it in a way that I'm trying to help other people learn from that.
Yeah.
And so instead of walking into rooms and business deals and using my ego and telling how I can take things from A to B and, the old me, I suppose, this whole thing's been about, man, I almost fucking jumped off a building when I was 23 years old. And then I got this alcohol addiction. And so let's leave the conversation here just about like, how can people start to feel more comfortable having these conversations? Where can they go? How can they start this process of, how did you explain it? Just like looking under, like, how did you explain it there? Like you've got all these...
Well, yeah, looking under the waterline, so to speak, or looking under the surface.
Yeah.
I think part of it that you're touching on, which is something I see in the clinic all the time, people share with me all kinds of things that are going on in their life because they want to tell me so that I can try and help them. Yeah. And they often haven't told anybody, and they think they're the only one struggling with this. And they're like, they'll say, I haven't shared this with anyone,
right?
But, and then they share it, and you could see the look of judgment or failure in their own eyes about even admitting something that they're struggling with. And these are the belief structures that we're often given or we've grown up with in society, that you're not allowed to struggle. If you are, I don't want to hear about it,
Right.
If you're not feeling super happy and totally on your game today, pretend you are, and if you're not, don't say anything, because maybe you're afraid of being judged, and you might have been judged for it, and it wasn't healthy to share. And so there's these concepts in even psychology of like accurate reflection is what it's called, where you may share something with me about how you're feeling, and I could inaccurately reflect, no, you're wrong. That's not how you're feeling. You're fine.
Right.
And how many times we all heard that in different ways. And again, nothing against parents, teachers. I had beautiful parents. I had a lot of beautiful teachers. Some of the teachers in my life, it was because it was actually harsh. Or we convince people they're not feeling how they are. You're saying, hey, I'm really thrown off today. I'm like, nah, you're fine. We're good, right? You're good. Yeah. And how often that's not very true. So that's not an accurate reflection. So if that happens enough, you might actually start disbelieving how you feel. And this is where we see so much disconnect. People are not sure how they're feeling because they've had so much inaccurately reflected exchanges with others around them. Mm-hmm. And it was often just because the other people around them were not in a state to be able to show up in that way. They had their own stuff they were confused about, let alone dealing with somebody else's. Yeah. So it's often suppressed or shoved away, and then we learn how to shove that stuff deeper too. We pack it under the waterline, and then we don't ever go look there again, but we wonder, why are we in crisis mode right now? And I can usually tell you, it's like, what are you holding over here? Yeah. So every emotional response we have to something, if somebody cuts you off in traffic and you blow up, it's not about that guy that cut you off in traffic. It's about everything that you've been carrying for 20 years or 30 years. And that does and can take some work, but it's completely possible. Completely possible. You're an example of that, and I know you're still in the process of doing that. But look where you are already. You've got a company helping people with all of these things that we're talking about. Mm-hmm. That's amazing, because you're in a way like forced to go and look at that stuff, and then you did, and you took that empowerment into your life. So you can make healthy decisions from a healthy state of being. Yeah. And that's really powerful.
Yeah, thank you, man. But I'll tell you, it became 10 times easier to look at the stuff under the waterline when I started to microdose.
So I'm curious about that.
Yeah.
What did you feel, aside from just results of like less anxious or less stress or all those things, but what could you feel in the body, or what was happening in your mind with it as you were going through?
Well, for me, it was, I started to realize what was giving me the stress and anxiety.
So you're starting to see your life patterns.
Totally. So I started to look at, okay, what is happening in my life that's super unhealthy that got me to feeling like this? Whereas, like I mentioned before, like, dude, I'd get into this like emotional tornado inside, and I'd just run, man. Like, I just had all sorts of things that I would run to, all unhealthy, and I never wanted to sit in it and absorb it and figure it out. And what microdosing did for me, and this happened really quickly, was I realized the root of a lot of why I was running. And so then it was like, how do I address that? And for me, a lot of that stress lied in my business partners and the relationships that I currently had, the people around me that I at that time had around me. And I had to figure out, honestly, how to get these people out of my life. And you know, I was victim to narcissist abuse for that entire journey with my last business. And so, man, just like what you were just saying, like you lose, like you want to speak out, but then like a part of you is thinking like, well, this guy's making it feel like it's not a big deal, but really it was a really big deal. Yeah. And so as soon as I cut those ties is when my real things started to accelerate for me. I really started to take my healing to a next level.
Yeah.
That's what got me back into seeing a counselor. Which I wasn't opposed to it, but I hadn't done anything like that since rehab. Like I just thought like, fuck, all I've done is talk to a counselor for a long time, like so many hours. But I realized how important it actually really was to stay up to date with some of that stuff. And so those sessions going into the counseling sessions were a lot different because I wasn't spending 25 or 30 minutes of the 1 hour. Like, I don't know, my guy literally hits like a 1 hour clock and then it goes off at the end. And I'm assuming this happens for everybody, but it's never started at that first minute, right? Like, we're not diving into the problem until minute 35, right? Yeah. But generally, like, I had some sessions where I walked in there and I didn't even, this is pre-microdosing, that I didn't even know where to start. And then all of a sudden it seemed like with the microdosing, I really knew where to take the conversation. I had already kind of thought about the things that I wanted to say and talk about. And so I'm fascinated to see where microdosing goes at this level for people, because I truly think that there really is a place for this in modern medicine and in plant medicine, and combining the two together. And in my personal experience, it's completely and utterly changed my personal counseling sessions. I actually know a lot of therapists now throughout this process, and they happen to think that this is one of the biggest breakthroughs in mental health history.
Yeah.
Have you heard of anything like this from any of your colleagues? Like, anybody that you might know that's doing therapy?
Yeah.
Are they working with psilocybin? Are they working with microdosing? Obviously, leave the names out, but just I'm looking at this broadly across your perspective. Like,
I think that when really powerful tools come along, you can either see it in the results or you can't. And in this case, psilocybin and a lot of the research, even at different universities, especially in the US, and research is happening in Canada very much so too, whether it's like macrodosing or microdosing, and certainly with the right therapy or counseling and somebody helping guide them through in addition, those things together are super, super powerful. And the research shows it, patients are experiencing that, and so there's definitely a lot of counselors that are doing training of how to facilitate therapy with psilocybin. And other psychedelics too, like there's a huge psychedelic movement going on, of course, but the results are there. And that's what really piqued my interest. I think I shared last episode too, of like, look at the results, read the research, like it's all laid out. So some of these results that are being seen with mental health are some of the best results that have ever been seen. And that's a game changer. So if we're looking at all the tools that are available, I would say, some of the plant medicines that are available can be used really safely, really responsibly. Again, I can't prescribe these things in my practice. This is through me connecting with lots and lots of patients, therapists, other doctors, and you can see the wave coming through because people need help. They want help, they want resources, and they want things that are healthy for them and get really beautiful results. And these are where I think mushrooms intersect in a really beautiful way, is they have a tremendous safety profile, but they're tremendously effective. And whenever you can combine those types of things together, amazing. And then bringing the mindful element into it, that we're being very intentional with anything we're doing in life. I think that's a big bonus for everybody, regardless of what you're going to take or not take. If you can show up intentionally, you start getting good support structures in your life. And a lot of what you shared too, I've seen that in my own life and many other people. Who you surround yourself with is really a big key.
The biggest key.
Like, so important. So your environment, we have an environment internally that needs to be addressed usually. And then we have our external environment. And both of those create each other simultaneously. So internally in the body, that's where I do a lot of work with patients and like clearing and detoxing things that are dragging them down. They're sacking their energy, they're leaking energy. And a lot of people have realized they don't know that they're leaking energy. So that's where the treading water piece comes in for so many people. So I'm like, hey, you know what? There's a leak here, here, and here. Let's work on those. Then you can at least start holding your energy. And if you can contain your energy in a more healthy and balanced way, lots of things start shifting. And I think we often forget about the physical body in this. So we're talking about mental health, but the body is just as much a part of that as anything else. So that is where acupuncture, massage, chiropractic, like different things that treat the body, they treat much more than what we think just physically. And then the mental piece, whether it's counseling or microdosing or using really balanced tools, when you start infusing that together, so to come back around to your question a little while ago, we were riffing on it, is don't forget about the physicality of what your body needs, and then building some healthy tools in your environment around you and with the people that you're getting support with. Because not everybody is the best support for the same person. And so I'm sure you've experienced that too. And I tell patients that when they come and see me, like, I might be your guy, I might not be your guy.
Yeah.
That's okay, as long as there's some resonance there. That's really vital. And resonance with anything that you may take, like plant medicine or not, or microdosing, feel the resonance of it for you. Yeah. You know, feel the energy of these things, and maybe even actually right now, a tool that people can use to get in the body a little bit more.
Yeah.
And maybe do this with me here is, you know, we have so much energy in our hands, and we are in our hands too. Like, we can be our own healers. A lot of people don't understand that yet. I'm still understanding that, and probably will always. But even how you're holding your hands right now, can you feel any sensation in your hands back and forth? Could be like warmth, even just tingling. Maybe it's even just a sense of energy. Some people feel a little bit electrical.
Yeah, I would say a little electrical.
And when you focus on your hands even more, it'll often amplify, because now we're focusing. And if I focus on your hands, you might feel them a bit more too. So when you're moving into a practice like this is just really showing you that you can feel your own body, that you do know how you feel, that you're not out of body, that you're in your body, and we're this like physical being also. And you can kind of play with that a little bit. Some people may feel it even a little bit wider. And for anybody listening that's watching this too, and you don't feel it, you can just rub your hands together a little bit, you know, create a little bit of heat. Sometimes you can even just clap a little bit and then see.
Oh yeah.
Feel a bit more, hey?
Totally.
So then you can even expand that and see, if you imagine you're holding a beach ball or something, some people feel a little bit of pressure. And this is just really straightforward and really simple, but it's meant to show you like that how connected we really are, and how we can connect with ourselves again. And I think that's where anxiety, depression really shows up, is we've lost connection with ourselves. And then we've lost connection with maybe the outside world around us too. So start with you. Start with that connection through your own body, through your own hands. And a really great practice to do is, while you're doing this, just breathe into the diaphragm, breathe into that still point. And for anybody that's listening, again, if you're feeling anxious right now, just take a deep breath, and usually 4 seconds in, hold for 4, and out for 4 is a really good start. And they call it box breathing. There's so many breathing techniques available, but if you're in for a count of 4 beats, hold for 4 seconds. And then when you let it out at the same duration, just nice and slow. It'll reset the nervous system. It'll bring you back into your body.
It's amazing. This has me thinking about vibrational frequency. And I can tell you it's something I've been fascinated with. And I think I was 22 or 3 years old when my mom sent me a copy of The Secret.
Okay.
And, you know, just ever since being a little bit fascinated about this like law of attraction and frequency and vibrational frequency. And I can tell you that at times I recognize that my frequency is low, and all of a sudden that's like translating to me like not getting the same everyday bounces that I usually get, you know, getting the bad news, and so I'm interested from your perspective, like how much of this is used as a medicinal tool for you, like raising people's vibrational frequency. Is there a correlation between mental health and low vibrational frequency that you know of? I'd love that. I'd love to ask you that.
Yeah.
And what are some tools that we could do, all of us can use, to potentially just raise that frequency so that we can access a higher level of healing and a higher level of alignment? I've always been fascinated with this.
So I think there's maybe 2 ways to answer this, and we can I'd almost love to really dive into the depth on vibrational or frequency in the next episode.
Cool. Okay.
And speaking to anxiety, though, especially right now, part of it is we want to raise our vibration, but we don't want to raise our anxiety. And they're not the same thing. So you and I have had conversations about grounding before, and grounding has become really popular. But I think it's something that as humans, we did, especially indigenous cultures, they were so immersed in nature already. They lived in nature.
Yeah.
They connected themselves to the forest, the moss, the trees, the sun, the water. All of those elements in nature are supportive to the body. And so when you go for a swim in a lake or you're in a waterfall or something, I don't know if there's anybody out there that would say, I didn't feel better from that.
Yeah.
You always feel better. Mm-hmm. And if you're breathing in fresh air in the trees and that really vibrant oxygen, do you feel better? Always.
Yeah.
And so part of it is, especially with anxiety, is finding, for me anyway, nature. And even if you're not in nature, just imagine that you are in nature, because the mind sometimes doesn't even know the difference. So you can envision laying on a moss floor of a forest and breathing in that fresh oxygenated air. And whether you're actually physically there or you're only mentally there, your nervous system will respond to that. So all that extra static that we pick up that has caused all this anxiety and overwhelm and panic, that has a place to go. And it can go into the ground. And that's the grounding part.
Okay.
Feet on the soil, on the grass, barefoot. A lot of people are doing that now because they notice they feel different.
Yeah.
So if you can connect yourself like directly physically to some type of Mother Earth grounded energy, whether it's a tree or plants, whether you're in an apartment, you can connect with the plant. It'll have that grounding energy, and just connect your consciousness into it. And then all of that extra voltage that needs a place to go can be settled. And then raising your frequency, you can pull that pure, clean energy from the earth back up into your body. So we can do an exchange, and Mother Earth is very gracious with us as humans being able to live here, that we can ground our energy that's maybe not so high vibration, and trust that she'll help balance that out, and that she can, giving thanks and gratitude for Mother Earth, especially, and for us being here. This is our home. This planet is our home. Letting our energy pass into that depth, and then allowing clean energy to come back up into the system that's already been purified. Just like a tree pulls up clean water or pulls up the nutrients from the soil. That practice alone, again, whether you're in nature or not, if you can just take a minute or two to do that, it can actually physically change how you're vibrating and how your cells are performing.
Wow.
And just with that alone, health is affected.
Okay.
Again, so simple.
Totally.
Doesn't cost anything. And this is also why I believe that mushrooms in general, reishi, shiitake, shaga mushrooms, they grow on trees. They grow in the forest. They're so connected to the microbiome of Mother Earth and the planet. I believe that's why people are getting really beautiful results microdosing, because that's connecting them back to nature. That's bringing them back into themselves, helping them ground and open and expand at the same time. So this is where we get into using tools in a really intentional way. And regardless of where you are, you can tap into this energy that's there. And then there's, you guys have built some really beautiful tools for people to be able to do that. And with many patients I talk to, and maybe your experience too, connecting with the mycelium web that is completely infused in Mother Nature. And if we do that physically at the same time, that can be a great tool as well.
I love that. So how would you, do you have a definition for grounding? Like if you were explaining this to somebody, maybe they're listening to this and they can't see us right now. What is grounding? Is it just that connection to Mother Earth? Like just exactly kind of what you said? Or
I think, everybody can kind of define it themselves.
Yeah.
So I'll give you my interpretation is, a lot of what I've mentioned, but when I feel that connection, and even as I was speaking about this, my hands are like buzzing and kind of electrical because I can feel the ground under us. because I've established that connection. And then my physiology feels anchored, calm, really clear, really solid. Mm-hmm. And I don't need to be anywhere else than where I'm at right now. And that to me is a grounded state of being. That's a really serene feeling. It's very peaceful. And so when I'm grounded in this way, the decisions that I make for my life, they're quite different than when I'm not grounded. So I love to return to this place or cultivate this as much as I can all day and all night. Sleeping in the forest, camping, where you're actually connecting with the ground. Yeah. It will change the physiology of the body. And they've shown that with science in terms of negative ions and creating the beautiful polarity in our bodies that promote health and healing. But that is what grounded is. Okay. Feeling that earth connection for me. Yeah. And then if I'm orienting from that place, then there's a lot more flow in my life for sure. Okay.
This has been amazing. I think if we loop this all back to mushrooms just as we close this out, if you're someone today that has anxiety, depression, PTSD, what medicinal mushrooms or functional mushrooms do you help with, or do you kind of lean people towards? Is it lion's mane? Is it cordyceps? Like our immunity blend? Because really we're trying to give people the actual tools themselves, but also the medicines that we can provide to help with those tools. That combination is really powerful.
So the fairly straightforward answer is lion's mane. To me, tremendous for the nervous system, great for the brain, focus, mental clarity. It does, for some, seem to have a calming effect as well. And when I really put my Chinese medicine hat on, different things for different people. Yeah. So if somebody was seeing me, I'd try and understand more about them to refine that down. And so when we're not in that type of availability, then I would say for some, cordyceps would work really well. Although cordyceps tends to be, and especially for me, a bit more stimulating. Yeah. And in Chinese medicine, it's more of like a yang tonic, like energizing. So that's why it's used more for exercise, working out, strengthening the body. It's a tonic for the lungs. It's a tonic for the kidneys, especially in traditional Chinese medicine. So for me, I don't use cordyceps to calm, but reishi has a more neutral effect that way, a little more balancing effect. My body responds to it really well. My body responds really well to lion's mane as well. Lots of patients do too. Some people even find shaga mushroom can be pretty calming. And then I would also say on the microdosing front, a lot of patients report that just as an overall effect, they feel more calm. They feel more grounded. Yeah. So it's not necessarily something that has to be taken like before sleep to sleep better. It can be taken more as a regimen, and that's where people are reporting like the schedule of microdosing and being on for 3 days and off for 2, or of course, a lot of people listening probably, you can find that on your website, I think, as well, in microdosing schedules or with the dose itself and frequency, that a lot of the functional mushrooms can be used in tandem. If somebody was microdosing, you can use a lot of the other mushrooms together. And so a morning regimen would maybe more like on the cordyceps front, and I know you guys have products that are more performance oriented, and then there's other ones that are a little bit more balancing, and I know you guys are having a different tea line of products as well, that a lot of the teas, whether it's like lavender or chamomile or some of those, you guys have been in the lab, I think, alchemizing like some of those things together, which is super exciting too. So I would say, people check out your website, see what you guys have, and I'm open for more questions in the future to refine that further too.
Okay, man. Because I feel like we could sit here for another 2 hours, and I have no idea where this time just went. But why don't we leave off with just a tool that you can think of that, if somebody is super stressed today and wants to do like I used to do, which used to be, reach for the booze, reach for the drugs, reach for the poisonous person in their life that is just going to make them feel better. What could we give them in 10 minutes or less that maybe they can take as a tool? We can pin it on the website. We can pin it on your website. We can chop it into a YouTube. And maybe not 10 minutes or less. Why don't you just guide the rest of this tail end. I have no idea what's
Sure.
coming, by the way. I have no idea what you're going to pull out of your hat, but I'm certainly open to it and would love to sit up here and participate with you and see if we can do it together.
So why don't we all tune in, everybody watching or listening, just rub our hands together a little bit, bring back that body-centered, grounded feeling. You even clap your hands, kind of activating yourselves. And then for me, I like to just hold my hands out sort of parallel to the ground wherever you might be, and just imagine that you are sitting on the forest floor somewhere. Beautiful, calm, quiet, serene forest. Or follow where your mind guides you to a beautiful, safe, and calm space. Maybe it's a place you've been to before, somewhere you feel completely at peace and relaxed. Maybe it's a beach by the ocean. I'm going to be in the forest, so please join me wherever you wish in your mental vision here, with somewhere that you feel comfortable. This is a safe space, and start to feel the ground beneath you. And feel that energy coming up from Mother Earth into your hands, into your feet, as your body relaxes a little further. And allow the breath to come in. Nice deep breath in through the nose if you can. Nice slow release. Find a comfortable place for your hands. Once again, establishing that connection with Mother Earth. She is here to support us, and we are here to support her. Feeling that mutual, sacred reciprocity of giving and receiving. Focus on the breath a little more. Nice deep breaths in, engage the diaphragm, breath down into the belly. Sometimes it helps if you place your hand just over your navel, connecting in. If your other hand's free, you can put it on your heart or over top of your other hand, whatever feels comfortable. And then breathe into that space even more deeply. And as you're sitting in this calm, serene space, maybe you're looking for some guidance, maybe you're looking for some advice. I want you to imagine that sitting in front of you, facing you, is an element of your higher self, your soul self. And in this case, this is your older self. Somebody who has even more knowledge and wisdom than you, but it is you. And so if you want to project this image of your 10-year older self, maybe your 20-year older self, I'm actually going to sit with my 100-year-old self right now. And he's sitting cross-legged in front of me with a big smile on his face, also sitting on the forest floor. And he has mastered energy. He has mastered breathing beautifully and harmoniously. And so whatever age of your self is in front of you, just say hello. Welcome them in. Because you are your guide, and this is part of you that has already experienced so much more. They've already gained that wisdom that you're hoping to get. They've already mastered certain elements of your life that you have yet to master in this moment. But that person sitting in front of you has mastered these elements. This is your authentic self that you're looking at. Feel their beautiful presence and support in your life right now. They are already guiding you. They already know what's best for you, and they know the lessons that you've learned. Allow yourself to connect with them even more now. Take a deep breath as you connect deeper together. Feel nature underneath you, the connection to that vast web of life, and imagining that this higher self of you, this older self, may have some guidance or a message, or it may be that they just have love to bring you today. And they don't even need to say a word, but you can see that love reflected through their eyes back to you. Feel how proud of you they are. Feel that energy pass between you. Notice who you are now. Notice what you accomplished. And know that you are in full resonance with that future self already. And this is where we can lay down our worries and our fears and let them settle onto the forest floor, where they dissolve into pure light particles, turning themselves back into usable energy to support new life and new growth. Feeling that weight that you were carrying off your shoulders now, off your body, off your mind. Stripping it down just to yourself now, that pure being that you are. Not carrying anything that's no longer needed. You've set that down now. And taking a deep breath into the diaphragm, into the low belly. Still sitting and facing that higher self counterpart. Look into their eyes more deeply. See and feel the love they have for you. And feel your own gratitude for being here with this life. Imagining all the possibility that's laid out before you. Let this higher self be a guide for you today and every day moving forward. You can connect in with them anytime. Just become still and breathe, and they will be right there, for they are with you always. Let whatever information needed to be transferred today complete its transfer. Let that communication really land in your system, feeling new joy, new abundance coming in, and new energy coming into your system right now. Trusting that you are exactly where you need to be. And you are exactly who you need to be in this moment. And you're already becoming that higher self right now. And now imagine that higher self, that older version of you, now merges into you completely. You become one. And now you fully embody that wisdom and that knowledge right now. Feel how supportive that feels to your life, to your spirit, to your soul, being fully integrated here in this moment. Connecting with Mother Earth, feeling solid, secure, and grounded. Nice deep breath in. Let out any sounds. Maybe you want to sigh. Feeling the sensations in your body. Slowly coming back. Fully into your system now. Maybe stretching and moving however you see fit. And slowly open your eyes when you're ready. Just be gentle and kind with yourself. Welcoming your body back, welcoming your mind back. Welcome back.
Thank you. It's a beautiful way to end.
Thanks for having me on again today, brother, and looking forward to doing more.
Thank you, man.